Alright, I'm going to move on to the lower receiver on this high standard Victor. First thing that's going to come off of this is the slide stop. In order to take that off, you first have to remove the grip, which is as easy as pulling that screw. And this is on the right hand side of the gun. Remove that screw, take the grip off. Helps if you remove the screw all the way. Once you have the grip off, the slide lock is right there, slide stop. If you look, you can see right here, there's a tiny little spring. That spring is actually seated into a hole in the slide stop. When you pull the slide stop out, there's a tendency for that thing to go flying across the room too. So when you pull it out, be very careful about how you remove it. Try to keep it pushed forward just a little bit and take it out slowly to slowly release the tension on that, and then it should actually stay in place. Okay, next thing to do is to remove this screw in order to get the side plate off. Before you do that, you have to release the tension on the hammer. Now it's not important to do right now, but 4 steps down the road, if you don't have the hammer released, there's no way to release it. So put your finger over the hammer, pull the trigger, and release the hammer nice and easy. Alright, once you have the hammer tension released, you need to take off the side plate. Take the side plate off by removing the screw, and you'll see that the side plate also fits over the hammer pin and the trigger pin. As you release it, if you watch, you'll see that it is under a little bit of tension and it'll kind of spring up. Right there. So take that screw out, take the side plate off of those 2 pins, and that exposes the safety. The safety also sets on the hammer pin. Just lift it straight off the hammer pin. This tab on the safety right there fits down into that hole. This smaller tab on the front fits down just in front of the sear bar, right in front of the hammer pin. Once you have that off, the next thing to remove is that spring right there. This is a flat spring. Easiest way to remove that without losing it is to use the bent nose needle nose pliers and just grab it and pull it out. If you don't have that tool available, take 2 fingers and cover it to keep it from flying away on you. Take a tiny little screwdriver, set the screwdriver in here just like this while your fingers are over it, and just pinch it together, and it'll pop right out of there into your fingers. Just make sure your fingers are over there so it doesn't go anywhere. So get that screwdriver set in place, put your fingers over it, squeeze it with the screwdriver, and let it pop up under your fingers. What you're doing with that screwdriver is just pinching it together to get it to release. That is your sear bar spring. That leaves you with the sear bar, which in theory should just lift right out. As you can see, it's long enough that it doesn't like to come out on this end. So what I like to do is just tip the gun over, tap it out in my hand. Okay, next thing we're going to do is remove the trigger. To remove the trigger, you need to get that pin out. And this is the trigger pin right here. That's just a little drift pin. What I like to use is a nylon or plastic hammer so I don't mar the finish. And then just tap that a few times to get it started. Tap it until it's flush to get it started. Then take my drift punch, put that pin over a hole in my wood, and tap that the rest of the way out. And like with the other pins, I like to do, get it almost out, and then just put it on my hand and finish tapping it out into my hand. That way it doesn't get lost. pull your drift punch out. Now to get the trigger out, trigger will come, it'll fall free. Rotate it so that it's like that, and the curve of the trigger will give it room to just fall out. Alright, the next one is the hammer pin. The hammer is under tension from the mainspring and the mainspring strut assembly. It attaches to the bottom of that hammer, so it's under quite a bit of tension. This is the hammer pin. Now again, in order to make this easy, I like to set this off to the side. Use a plastic or silicone hammer to get that knocked flush to get it started. And again, grab an appropriately sized drift pin and then use that to tap it the rest of the way. Put your finger over it. It shouldn't come out because the drift pin should replace the hammer pin to keep it from coming out, but just in case, keep your couple of fingers over there to keep that from flying off. Tap that through, and you heard the pin fall out on the other side. There's your hammer pin. Now, keep your hand and your thumb over this with some pressure while you pull this drift punch out. And then slowly ease up on the pressure to release the tension on the hammer, and the hammer will just pull straight up. As you remove the hammer, make sure you recognize that the hammer strut, which is sticking up right here, and the spring that it's attached to don't actually attach to anything. They're just fitted in there, they're pinched between this post right here and the post inside the hammer. So be careful not to lose those. When you're ready to, just pull them straight up, and that is your hammer strut and your hammer strut spring. What fell out on the bottom here was that post that goes right there, which has a cutout in it, a hole in it, that the mainspring and hammer strut fit through. Next one we're going to worry about is the sear pin. If you flip the gun over on the right hand side, you'll see that the sear pin has a tiny little retainer clip on it, a C-clip. That C-clip does not have to come off. Do not take it off. That's the direction you want to push it out, is push it out towards that C-clip. Now for this I like to use a little bit smaller pin, a little bit shorter, just because it's a little bit more precise. Put it on the sear pin. A lot of times you can just push this out. You don't even have to use a hammer. Push it out. Sear pin comes out. And then keep your finger over the sear because it's under pressure from the sear spring as you remove the hammer, or correction, as you remove the drift punch. Once you have the drift punch out of the way, you can remove your finger and that sear should just tip out in your hand. It'll pull straight up. Just like that. Now, if you look inside there, what that leaves is the sear spring right here. Looking from the top, this is the sear spring down here. If you have a model with an adjustable sear, it's adjusted from that screw right there, which is actually two pieces. It's a tiny little bolt and then a longer post that's forked. If you've got an adjustable model, adjustable sear, stop here and remove those two pieces. To do that, just use your tiny little screwdriver and back this screw out. It's not very big, so be careful not to lose it. There's the first piece. And if you tip the gun up, the other piece should fall out. Now if you look at this, that fork is what the tail of the sear spring, the adjustable sear spring, fits into. And then these two pieces fit together just like that. Sear spring, like everything else on this gun, is held in place by a drift pin right there. So again, using an appropriately sized drift punch, and this is another one of those places where it's a little bit more precise, so I like to use a small one. Get a drift punch, set it on top of the pin, and just just tap it out. There's your sear spring pin. And this is not under tension anymore, so once you release it, it'll just fall out. Hold the gun upside down, pull your drift pin out, and the sear spring will just fall right out. So, other than the magazine release, the only thing you have left is the takedown pin. If you want to remove the takedown pin, it's another drift punch. You just knock that drift punch out, and that button and a spring will come out with it. I still recommend a roll pin punch for roll pins. Tap that out. As you pull that out, this is under just a little bit of tension. Keep your finger over it. Let that pop out into your hand. That'll come out. And the spring that holds it in, or the spring that makes it function, will come out. Now when you're putting this together and taking it apart, the key-shaped hole in that is what holds the barrel on. You're actually you're pushing the button in to line up those two holes, so that when you release the button, it gets locked in place. Now at this point in time, the only thing remaining on this receiver, on this lower receiver, your frame, is the magazine release. I am not going to remove the magazine release because this pin right here has got to be the hardest part to find for high standard pistols. If you screw up that pin so that this thing doesn't stay in place, it's very difficult to find a replacement. Also, there is a tool that is used for putting this back in, because this whole thing is under tension right there. It likes to push back this way and keep you from lining up that pin. They actually make a tool for reassembling that. There's a way to do it without that, but it takes about 6 sets of extra fingers. In short though, if you drive out that pin will drive all the way out, and these 3 pieces will just release. This piece, the post, and the spring will all just release. Drop a shot cloth inside here, just shove it up inside there, so that as you drift that punch out, that shot cloth will catch those pieces. That's what I do. Putting it back together is the same thing in reverse, just not easy to do without that tool. Keep that in mind. And with that out, you now have a completely stripped lower receiver or frame for a high standard Victor.